If you're a private practice owner and you're doing decent revenue, maybe you're doing even good revenue, close to about $1 million or more, but your profit still feels razor thin no matter how hard you push for growth, this episode's going to be for you. Here's the hard lesson that I had to learn. You cannot grow your way out of a bad margin. In fact, growth and profit margin are usually fighting against one another. And so today I'm going to show you how to read your numbers, set a simple budget inside your practice, and to keep yourself from being the crazy owner who hustles harder and somehow still ends up broke at the end of the month. All right. So the biggest money lesson that I've had to learn, and the one that I continue to learn, is this. It's an illusion to think that you can grow yourself out of a profit margin problem. Yes, for those who are like, but Adam, the answer is yes. In the early phase, you need more volume. But once you're more established, and say you're somewhere around that $1 million a year mark, let's say 750 to 1.2-ish, more staff and more locations often hurt your profit margin if the underlying model isn't efficient. Because every new hire, every new eval, every new service that you add to your business adds more complexity. So there's more intake calls, there's more phone calls, there's more emails, there's more mistakes, right? Because you have humans in your business. There's more fires. And so when you add all of that complexity, you end up out of time, out of cash, and really tired along with your team. So instead of only thinking, how do I grow? You have to start asking the more boring question, which is, how do I make the machine more efficient? And so in this episode, I'm going to walk you through your 4 financial touch points in your practice, the 5 simple financial metrics that you should be tracking, how to break your expenses into 5 buckets with healthy budgets for each, and how to use budgets as guardrails so you don't accidentally grow your way into going broke. Welcome to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Private Practice Scorecard, episode number 11. I believe it's number 11. Yeah, number 11. Why you're busy but broke, and how to fix your profit margins with simple budgets. This is huge. This is going to be leading up to the final episode, but this is the one that's boring. As far as like this type of work is really boring. It's really tedious, but it's where your financial solvency in your practice. This isn't something that I learned or I started implementing into my practice until later in my career. And quite honestly, it's probably the single most impactful way that I learned that gave me peace around the finances, knowing that I was going to be safe and that I was at least making decisions that preserved financial solvency in the business. This episode, along with the next one, so you have to tune in next week, were the biggest players in that, and also helped me scale up multiple companies because I was able to keep simple financial temperature on all of them without overwhelming myself or going crazy, okay? Which is the same thing, all right? And so today I'm going to break this down for you. I'm going to try to give you as much value as I possibly can. And I'll try my best to articulate it in a way that makes sense and also share with you the thought patterns behind each of these principles, okay? So let's dive into it. Step number 1 is I need to share this principle that is really important for you to understand and internalize and accept as reality. Because if you try to grow your business without fully understanding this, you might find yourself in trouble. At least I know that I did. Okay, and that is this idea of growth versus profits. All right. Typically, as entrepreneurs, as CEOs, as owners, we're good at deploying energy into the business. We hustle, we motivate, we have vision, we know how to typically market and sell a little bit because we're good. And we think that if we just do more of that stuff, that we can grow our way into financial freedom. And there's some truths to that, but it doesn't tell the whole story, all right? Because the truth is that growth and profit margins, or growth and profits, are often in tension. They're competing with each other. And they require two different skill sets in order to be good at each, right? So there will be seasons of growth. There will be seasons of efficiency. There will be seasons of a blended growth plus efficiency, right? And it's important to know what season you're in and what skill sets and tools and strategies you can use to maximize each of them, okay? But as mentioned, growth typically requires or adds more complexity, more problems, and more overhead, okay? So growth equals more complexity. It increases problems and overhead, okay? I remember, and listen, if you are a practice owner or a business owner and you've been doing this for less than, let's say, 5 years, you might not fully understand this or be willing to accept this, and that's okay. You might be one of those crazy people like a younger version of Adam that's like, you know what, I'm going to grow. I'm going to open 10 locations, and I just want more locations because it's sexy and it's fun and it's cool and it's exciting and it's challenging. And yeah, all those things are great. However, there's a lot of upside to that, but we underestimate the downside of more complexity, more problems, and more overhead. Okay, profit is a little bit of a different resource. It's a different strategy. It requires more calculated efforts, okay? And so essentially, what drives profit? It's doing more with the same or fewer resources. So it's an efficiency metric. Which requires you to be more patient and to learn more and to automate more. And it's actually the idea of doing less. Like, you have to learn how to get to the final product quicker and spend less energy, less time, less money, less people, which is a harder problem. It requires more of this up here. All right. And so, yes, in the early stages, let's say if you're doing like under $500,000 a year, so you're probably somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 a month in revenue. You're going to need, the truth at that phase is, yes, you need more volume to get off the ground, right? There is a base level of volume that you need. And there's also, just full transparency, more volume will create more abundance and more opportunity, but it becomes less critical after that stage. Once you kind of hit that window, there's a new skill that you need to learn. All right. And so once you're above that $500,000 to $1 million per year, so let's say you're over $60,000 a month. All right. Up to about $100,000 a month. Right. That's really the season where you learn how to implement your systems of efficiency, and you craft in your margin, and you build your team, and you get things really lean and efficient. All right. And so if you're in that season, let's say you're around 60 to 70, maybe $80,000 a month, and you find yourselves with thin profits, trying to grow out of that usually will stretch your team really beyond what they're capable. It'll stretch their team. It'll bloat your costs, right? Your inefficiencies that already exist will become magnified. They'll also scale up, right? So you have more problems, more inefficiencies, and it's going to leave you and your people and your bank account exhausted with the same or worse profits. If you scale up, if you try to grow without being really good at solving that problem of efficiency, then you end up scaling your problems instead of scaling a solution. That's really important. That's another important way to think about it. You don't want to scale up problems, right? I remember opening up my second location, and I thought I had it all together, and it was still really, really hard. But when you open up a second location, all your problems double. Plus you have commute between the two offices. So you got to be really careful. All right. And so what I want you to think about as we go into kind of like the meat of this episode is I want you to think about a mindset shift. For all of you egomaniacs that want to take over the world and create an empire, this is hard, all right? The mindset shift is that growth is only one lever that you need. It's an important one, but it's only one. The one that's typically harder is efficiency and discipline. Efficiency plus discipline. And that is usually where the money is. That's usually where the money is. Getting good at your metrics. There's got to be somebody in the company. Money's always going to want to be spent. You're always going to want to spend it and grow it. And your business always finds a way to gobble up the money. But there's somebody in the business has to be the person to be like, no, we're not going to spend any more money. We're not going to add any more complexity. We're just going to get better. We're just going to get better at our jobs. We're going to get more efficient here, more efficient here. We're going to carve out, we're going to become a team that can solve this problem with these limited resources. And that requires you to sit with discomfort, and your team has to wrestle with it. And it's a harder problem to solve. It requires more patience. It requires more discipline. Okay. And so that is what we want to help you with today. I'm going to give you some tools, not necessarily tools. I'm going to give you some principles. The next episode is going to be about tools that you can use to get better at this and to make it easier. You can operationalize this. Okay. But before we do that, I do want to quickly recap, because if you're just joining us, we're on episode 11. So there's 10 other episodes, and a lot of your problems in your business will be solved with your ability to drive revenue into the practice. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. You will have more options. You will be you'll be in a stronger position to create leverage in the company. If your systems are dialed in such a way that you understand how to drive revenue into the practice. Okay. So quickly, the 4 financial touch points of the practice. I'm going to give you the 3 that you already know, and then today is going to be the 4th. Okay. All right. So 4 financial touch points. And when I say financial touch points, what I mean by that in my brain is, and ideally this is going to be for traditional practices. You're in network with, you're doing 80% or more of your business is from insurance, right? You're not doing cash and all that stuff. But I would argue that even if you're doing cash, these are very similar. We're just going to call them different. We're just going to label them differently. Okay. But, what I mean by 4 financial touch points these are the points, the critical points within your practice that usually where you're engaging with a patient or the financial or the revenue cycle that must be optimized with great people and great systems so that you are maximizing the efficiency of each of these touch points. So you're driving as much revenue as you possibly can into your business legally and ethically. All right. That's what I mean by that. All right. So this is the money points. Okay. Number 1, over-the-counter collections. Okay. Quick recap. I do a full breakdown of over-the-counter collections in a few episodes ago. Okay. But essentially, the first financial touch point is your transaction over the counter. And so you want to optimize your people and your systems in that touch point such that you can understand how well your front desk or your virtual assistant is collecting patient responsibility at the time of service. That's all I'm going to say about that. And our goal is 100% of that patient responsibility is collected every day. Number 2, billing and coding. Okay. With your providers specifically at the provider level. Okay. So your delivery, you're delivering care, you're delivering your service, you're fulfilling your service to your patients. All right. And so we want to have systems, trainings and basic business principles that are installed in this touch point such that you are ethically maximizing both the quality of the units that you're billing and the quantity of the units that you're billing. And so essentially you want to understand which CPT codes, which units pay more, and understand why they pay more, and understand what you would need to do to deliver that value and document it appropriately, and start to developing treatment models around the higher value codes so that you can actually provide higher value care. Okay? And you want to understand how to track and manage the appropriate number of those higher value codes as often as ethically possible. All right? Because typically we have a tendency as healthcare professionals to leave a little money on the table, because we're givers, right? That's just the way it is. Okay? Billing and coding. Second financial touch point. Huge touch point, by the way. All right. Number 3 is going to be your billing department. Okay. Or your revenue cycle. Okay. So if you can understand, like, services are already kind of delivered at this point. And so your revenue cycle in the simplest form is going to be insurance verification, insurance authorization, billing, payment posting, managing AR, right? And so ensuring that when you're delivering this high value, you're collecting over the counter, you're delivering the most value possible, that your revenue cycle systems are optimized such that your denial rates are low or minimized, right? The time to pay and your AR cleanup is very short and quick and full. So your AR is really, really clean. Okay. So we can get money back into your practice as quickly as possible. So that's the third financial touch point. You have to have great systems in place. You have to have great people in place who can do that for you well. And then number 4, which is today's episode, budgets. Budgets. We'll just call it budgets. How about that? All right. And so here's the thing. Everything all the decisions that you make from a delivery perspective, I wouldn't say all of them, but if we say how much do you pay your team? How much do you offer a physical therapist or a clinician or whatever type of clinician you have in your practice? How much do you pay them? How much pay time off do you give them? What are their productivity expectations in your practice? I'm trying to think of another one. How much do you spend on marketing? How much do you spend on Google ads? How much do you spend on Facebook ads? How much do you spend on community events? All of those decisions come from the financial department, right? Because you got to be able to afford those things, right? And so we want to try to deploy as much capital as we can to our team and to our marketing and to the things that matter without compromising the financial health of the business so that we make sure we keep the business stable. And all of that comes not at the CEO level. CEO isn't the person that actually makes that call. It's the financial department that creates those budgets. All right. And this is where we get to operate from a place of constraint, meaning we're going to limit the amount of resources that can be used in each of these departments so that we can ensure that there's enough money left over to feed the business and to grow the business. Okay. And so what this is going to help you break down is how you allocate dollars, the money that comes in, where do you allocate it into the business? All right. And so specifically, we're going to look at 5 primary expense buckets in the business. Okay. Payroll. Everybody knows that one. How much do you spend on payroll? Hourly rates, salaries, bonus compensation, benefits packages. Okay. How much do you spend on marketing? Marketing and recruiting. Okay. How much money can you spend to attract people into your business? Okay. Operations expenses. All right. Rent, utilities, EMR bill. Right. Number 4, billing department. Okay. By the way, this isn't the only way that you can do this. This is just the way that I've done it. Okay. Some people like to take their billing and put it into operations, or take their billing and put it into payroll. That's less important. You can put this any way that you want, as long as you have a normative way of doing it and you're driving decisions around it. Okay. So billing department. And then the last one is supplies. Okay. Clinical supplies. Right. You're going to have to spend money on paper and, printer ink and new TheraBands, right? You're going to have to buy some stuff, right? And so this is the tool that you and your team use to stop yourself from spending every dollar that hits the bank. Because if you know anything about humans, we like to spend money and we're typically emotional about it. We typically have a way of just spending more money than we should, because it's easy, it's convenient, it's comfortable. And so if we don't have budgets or restraints, then human's gonna human, right? And so we want to avoid that. We want to avoid the emotional spending of money or allocation of money into the business, so that we can preserve and protect the financial health of the business. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is there's going to be 5 core metrics that I want you to, 5 core financial metrics that I want you to measure every month. All right. So I'm going to basically kind of go through them. Some of these you're going to be like, duh, I already know that. That's fine. But they're just going to be foundational. And by the way, you can build 5 locations on this very simple framework. You can use a spreadsheet. You don't have to use anything fancy to organize this. It's very simple. All right. And so some of this is going to be stuff you already know. Some of this might be stuff that we're learning. Okay. So the 5 metrics, 5 core financial metrics. Okay. By the way, again, this is Adam's way of doing it. There's no wrong way. Well, there's a wrong way. There's a lot of right ways. Okay. So if you talk to an accountant or a financial expert or a bookkeeper, they might say like, yeah, you know what? I have 6 metrics, or I have 4 metrics, and that's fine. What I have found, especially around metrics, is it's less important to obsess over the details of how you're measuring every metric and what metrics that you're measuring. And it's way more important for you to be consistent with measuring metrics the same way, with a routine that you stick to, and that you're making key decisions with those metrics. And over time, you'll find that they'll kind of adjust as you become more competent and more aware and develop your own style. But consistency is the key in the beginning. Okay. So number 1, gross income. Gross income, which is going to be total amount of dollars that came into the business, the top line revenue. Okay. It's going to be on the profit and loss statement. It's going to be the number one number right at the top. It's how much money came in: cash, insurance, over-the-counter collections. Yeah. All the money that came in. Okay. Any products that you sold, anything comes in. So every month you can see gross income month by month. January, February, March, April, May. You want to see how many dollars hit your bank account every single month. Okay. Number 2, gross expense. Okay. Very similar to income. It's the expense item. This is usually the second to last number on the P&L. Okay. This is total money that goes out. All the money that goes out of the business and is allocated towards the expense categories. Okay. Payroll, rent, softwares, marketing expenses, everything that goes out. All right. 3, net profit. Right? This is going to be just simply, gross income minus gross expense equals net profit, right? So as an example, let's say you have, $100,000 that came in minus $80,000 that went out, you have a net profit of $20,000. Net profit, $20,000 a month. Okay. Number 4, profit margin. Okay. That's going to be net profit divided by gross income equals profit margin percentage. All right. So as an example up here, you're going to have $20,000 divided by, which is going to be this number here, divided by the gross income, which is $100,000, equals 20% profit margin. 20% profit margin. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And so for most outpatient in-network practices, your long-term target is usually going to be somewhere between 15 to 20%. Okay. Ideally, we want to try to get that to 20% plus through the use of some of the strategies that we've talked about, driving your financial touch points, building your financial systems, adding cash pay services, learning how to market, learning how to sell, all of those things. And so if you're sitting under 10% profit margins for long periods of time, that's an indication that your business is financially fragile, that something has to shift. It doesn't mean you have to panic, but it means that something will have to shift. And so it's my recommendation to you is to confront it and understand, orient yourself and understand, why is my margin so thin? What options do I have, and how do I take one meaningful action to improving that, right? And so if I can go from 10, or let's say you're at 8% margins, if I can go from 8 to 18 over the course of a year or 18 months, that you're setting yourself up for a stronger future, right? You can pay your people more, you can market more, you just have a better business, okay? And then the 5th metric is going to be your expense buckets as a percentage of income, okay? And we talked about those, all right? So how much of each dollar goes to each of these buckets, all right? And so we talked about payroll, marketing, recruiting, okay? Operations, billing, and supplies. And so I'll try to kind of break this down. So let's say we're still coming down to this number here. Let's say we have $100,000. And let's say our payroll bill, every month, when you look over 12 months, let's say on average we spend $60,000 per month. Okay. Well, your payroll percentage would be 60,000, which is the expense bucket, divided by your gross income, which would equal 60%. So 60% of your dollars, 60% of every dollar that comes in is going towards payroll, right? So let's say marketing and recruiting, you spend $8,000 a month. Okay. I'm just going to give you 2 examples. So in this same thing, it would be $8,000 divided by $100,000 equals 8%. So you're spending 8% of your income, or your gross income, is being spent on marketing. Okay. You could do the same thing for operations, billing, and supplies. Right. And so what you want to try to do here is work with your bookkeeper, right? So you want to work with your bookkeeper to categorize every expense into one of these 5 buckets, right? Everything. So everything should be itemized. Maybe you use QuickBooks, or you can use, there's some other, you don't even have to use QuickBooks. You can just use a spreadsheet. Basically, you want to look at all the expenses, and every expense gets a label. It either gets a payroll label, a marketing and recruiting label, an operations label, a billing department label, or a supplies label, right? And so then you can start, and whatever's left over after paying all those buckets is going to be your profit margin, right? And so your goal is to try to deliver. You want to deliver, remember, going back to the definition of profit, right? Let's say you're at 8%. You're at 8% margins. Okay. Your goal is to, let's see if I can. Your goal here is to do more with the same or fewer resources. So you want to try to spend less in each of those buckets or grow the gross income bucket. So maybe grow from $100,000 to $110,000 while maintaining the same expense levels, right? So I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say I need to try to figure out how to get my profitability up. Okay, so let's say for payroll, here's an example. Let's say we're going to keep it at $60,000. Okay. So we're not going to spend any more money on payroll. We're not going to hire any more people. We're not going to add hours to the payroll budget. Okay. All right. So what if we were able to take our gross income and raise it up to $110,000? All right. How can we do that? Well, we can improve our financial touch points. We can collect over the counter better. We can bill and code better. We can improve our revenue cycle. We can add cash pay services. Look at the last revenue per visit video, right? We can raise production a little bit. Maybe your providers are seeing like 40 visits a week. Can we go to 50 visits a week? Can we go to 45 visits a week, right? What would we have to do to get to $110,000 in gross revenue? Well, now we're at 55%. So what you just did is you went from 60% of your money being spent on payroll to 55% of your money being spent on payroll. And that is a 5% difference that goes straight to the bottom line. That is pure profit, pure extra profit, right? So you go from 8% profit margin to 13% profit margin by being an owner who understands their metrics and who can improve the systems and efficiency in the business. Okay. So that's just an example there. But what I want to do is I want to give you some breakdowns of each of these. Okay. So what are the things that go into the payroll bucket? So this is going to be all of your wages, all of your benefits, all of your payroll taxes, all of the payroll transaction fees that you accumulate with your bank, right? Any fees that's related to your Blue Cross Blue Shield and your short and long-term disability, all of those things. All right. And so your target there is going to be less than 60% of gross income. Less than 60% of gross income. Ideally, you want to try to get that closer to 50%, right? But if you're doing less than 60%, you can make this work. You're not going to get rich, but you can have a practice that's working. But you got to keep it less than 60%. So you can't pay your therapist more than, and your team. So when I say payroll, I mean therapist, front desk, virtual assistants, anybody, any labor, okay? Marketing. Okay? What we want to look at here is like any expenses that are spent to attract humans to your practice, whether that's patients or clinicians or front desks or any human being. Right? So Facebook ads, your website, your SEO, your job postings, it could be your software, like if you're using Canva or graphic design software or anything like that. All right. So what we're going to do here is, let's look at $100,000. Let's say gross income, $100,000. So the budget here is $60K. Marketing, we want to be around 5 to 10% of gross income. Okay, so your budget is 5 to 10K per month. That's your budget in this scenario. All right. Now, typically, you're going to spend more on marketing early. A greater percentage of your marketing budget will be spent earlier in the business because you have no gross income, right? So like that, you're going to spend a lot more money on marketing because you have no income. But as that income rises to a sustainable level, that percentage should naturally fall. Okay? Operations. So we're looking at rent, utilities, your EMR, your insurance, your professional fees, your services, your accountants, your lawyer, any general overhead that is typically a fixed expense for the most part. Okay. Now, this bucket, what I've found is going to fluctuate, depend on where you live in the country, right? But ideally, we want to be somewhere around 5 to 10%. All right. I've seen this stretch up to 15% in places with high rent, right? 5 is a little bit unrealistic for most people, but somewhere between 10 upwards to 15%. Okay. So let's say our budget is 10K. All right. So you could see, $100,000 minus 60, we're at 40K, minus 10. Now we're at 30K, minus another 10. Now we're at 20K. We're only 20K left over. Business has got to make a profit, right? So we got the billing department. We still got to pay the billers. So I like to separate out my billing department because it's such a critical, specialized component of the practice. It's just the way that I'm familiar with. I can't really explain why I do it that way other than it's the way that makes me feel comfortable, and it makes me feel like I'm allocating the right amount of money to the revenue cycle, because that revenue cycle is key to scale. It's like so key to scale. Okay. So this could be, if you're outsourcing your billing, any outsourced billing fees that you accumulate, you could, if you have an in-house biller, then I would take that in-house biller payroll and put it into this category. I'd pull it out of the payroll and put it here. Or if you have a billing software, if you're anything that you're doing to manage your revenue cycle. Okay. So I like to break this out into a few different options. So if you're outsourced, you're going to be looking at 5 to 7% of your revenue. $5 to 7%, or $5K to $7K per month, depending on the quality of the service and the level of service that you're getting. Okay. If you're in-house, meaning you directly employ the billing department, we want to try to get that down to under 4%, or maybe even less over time, under 4%. So if you can't beat 4% in-house, then I'd recommend just outsourcing, typically. All right. And then lastly is the supplies bucket. The biggest mistake you can make is give one person in your company an unlimited credit card budget to buy whatever they want. Okay. But this is going to be like clinical, office supplies, equipment, cleaning supplies, small tools, the things that you need the knickknacks and crannies that you need to keep the practice going. Okay. We want to be somewhere around 1 to 2. 1 to 2% of gross income. Okay. Or 1K to 2K per month. Okay. And so what's left after all of this is going to be your profit. And so if all of these buckets add up to, let's say 90%, then you're going to have 10% margins. If they add up to 80%, then you're going to have 20% margins. Make sense? So that's how that works. All right. So let's do an example. One more example. Let's say payroll is 60%. Okay. Marketing is going to be 6%. Let's say operations is 15%. Let's say you live in a expensive city. Billing, you're outsourcing it at 5%. And supplies, you're at 2%. Okay? Well, if you add all those up, you're going to be 88%, which means your profit will equal 12% profit margins. And so when you see this, first of all, this doesn't, like, if your situation is worse than this or better than this, it doesn't mean you're good or bad or right or wrong. It just means it is, right? You know, it's very few times in my career where things have been going perfect in the business. Very few times. And so the unfortunate truth about running your numbers is that they usually reveal problems. But the fact that you understand the problem and that you're making at least small, meaningful progress towards solving it puts you in a very elite category, right? So having this isn't about removing problems from the business. It's just about understanding them, okay? But the beautiful thing about this is that once you have this data and you're measuring it clearly, you can start asking yourself, are you okay with 12% margins? Is that something you're comfortable with? If so, great. Keep rocking it. But if you're not, where can I trim spending? Where can I make my operations or my billing department a little bit more leaner? Where can I drive revenue per visit so that payroll percentage will shrink for payroll? Can I drive production a little bit stronger with my team? And so this is how you start to move from I feel broke to I know exactly which bucket is eating my margin and I know one thing that I can do about it. Okay? And so what you need to have in place to do this, it's very simple, right? You need a competent bookkeeper to, you can share this video with them and you can have them start putting those expense buckets together for you, and a monthly profit and loss report that's on time every month that basically closes out the month and tells you where you're at with those buckets. Okay. You need some time every month to do a simple monthly owner review. It could be about an hour. So ideally, you sit down with your bookkeeper or your accountant or whoever can help you, whoever understands your financial system, and you want to look at your gross income, your gross expense, your net profit. You want to look at your profit margins, percentages, and you want to look at each bucket as a percentage of income and start asking yourself, what bucket is too high? Where can we cut, automate, or delegate? Which improvements from previous episodes can we improve this time? Right? From previous episodes, when I say the ones that I just recorded, like, can we improve over-the-counter collections? Can we improve denials? Can we improve our payer mix? Can we become more efficient and lean with our admin team? Where can we improve? Right? And so the third thing you need is clear budgets and targets for each of those expense categories. And so you want to have a hard cap for each expense category. Payroll, less than 60%. Marketing, you want to be somewhere around 6 to 8%. Ops, 10 to 12%. Billing, 4 to 5%. Supplies, less than 2%. Okay? And you want to know what you can do, what levers you can pull to influence each of those buckets appropriately. And then lastly, you need the discipline to say no. I know you're an ambitious entrepreneur and you want to grow an empire, but you got to learn to say no. You can't just spend all the money because your budgets are going to exist there to stop you and your team from solving every problem by hiring more people or by adding more tools to the system. You got to figure out a way to become more efficient. And so instead, by saying no, you get to force process improvement. You force automation and you force delegation to lower cost roles like virtual assistants. You become more efficient. Okay? So guys, if you've found yourself or been telling yourself that we just need to grow more, but every month you still feel a little broke, the problem probably isn't growth. It's your model and your buckets. And Until you know what percentage of every dollar is going to payroll, marketing, operations, billing, and supplies, you're going to be steering the ship blind. And there's no amount of hustle that is going to fix a structure that's leaking margin from every side, especially in every bucket. Okay? And so if you want help cleaning something like that up, you can start with a free 20-minute Staffer Freedom call. And on that call, we'll look at your current revenue and expense mix. We can help you identify which buckets are choking your profit, especially payroll and operations. And we'll help you map out a staffing and people systems plan, including where a virtual admin staff or a better clinician recruiting decision can give you the same or better output for less cost. If that sounds helpful, you can click the link below in the description and book your Staffing Freedom call. All right. So don't keep trying to outwork thin margins. Get clear on your numbers, fix your buckets, and build a practice that can finally afford to run without you doing everything. Stay tuned for episode 12, which is going to be the final episode. I'm going to give you the tools, the 2 free tools to put all of this together that you can just put together and you have simple systems to make these decisions in your practice. We'll see you next week.